All right, here we go. Sorry about that. You know, when I don't use the headphones, then the sound thing becomes an issue. Thank you for that. We're 3 minutes in, and I figured it out. All right, here we go. There's Mary Black. Want to talk a little bit about Mary today? It's to teach us how to lip read. No sound, no sound, no sound. We're here now. Plenty of sound. Why are you deleting my messages when everyone is telling Robert he was muted? Well, I don't know. That's a good question. Just be on your best behavior. I've got some mods with pretty high standards. Aerodynamic sex juice, you're good as long as you stay within the lines, right? Victoria V in the house. Joe Dimitri. There's Judy. Hi, Judy. Want to catch up with you for sure. Misty Minor. Misty Minor. She's here today. Hello, Misty. Fifth Wall. Kestrel. Tessa D. What's going on, Tessa? JMP Love. Okay, I think we got the sound thing. Not saying anything objectionable, period. Good. Look, you can say, you can look. Here's the deal. You can be objectionable. I don't have a problem with being objectionable. If your objection is reasonable, that's cool, right? It's cool. And you can have a discussion. You know, I'm okay with reasonable objection. What I'm not okay with is trolls. And I'm not okay with people coming in to disrupt and being shitheads. You know, that's the only, so you want to object, that's fine. As long as it's reasonable and you have a point and you want to prove a point and it's a decent point and it's a point worth discussing. You probably shouldn't take up all the chat to discuss that point, right? That's why we have mods. So objection is fine. I'm not a dictator here. Some people think I might be, and there are times where I do take a little control, or the mods may be a little heavy-handed, but they've been the mods have been, I wouldn't say trained, but they've adapted to this strategy where people come in and they're agreeable for about 3 or 4 kinds of polite comments, and then they start to get all trolly, right? So they may be a little sensitive on the delete button. And again, I got no problem with objection as long as it's reasonable and as long as it doesn't take up the entirety of the chat. Be clear about that. And as far as comments go on the YouTube page itself, I leave 99% of them on there. The ones I delete are the women who supposedly think I'm hot and all that, and really they're just nothing more than, I don't know, guys in Nigeria or Kenya or wherever, right? That want to scam my money. So those get lifted. And if something is really, really kind of egregious and not great on the chat, on the comments page on the channel, and I mean it's really got to cross some lines, I'll delete it. 99% of the time I leave those comments there, which is kind of the etiquette for YouTube, right? So if you object, be reasonable with your objection. I don't think anybody has a problem with that. I certainly don't. Let's see. There's Crimmy's in the house. Nancy Ferrara. Well, our aerodynamic sex juice. Love right back to you. Tessa, what does she have to say? I had to change my display name because the system right, because of the last name. That's just so bizarre. Phil would have a field day with that. He would totally have a field day with that. Standards of morality and all the stuff that we used to take for granted are now under the microscope of such political correctness. It's not even funny. It's not even funny. You go back and you listen to some of the songs from the 1960s and the 70s, and you go, oh, gee, could they really get away with that today? Maybe in some circles they could. Let's see, Palace Athena in the house. Justice Moody. Wow, you can't say sex. I know, it's weird, right? And yet you can find porn like crazy all over YouTube. Megan Donovan in Berlin, hitting those Tresser beats. What's going on, Megan? Let's see, tight butt. Tight butt. Yeah, that's another term for anal retentive, isn't it? It's Google deleting him based on his handle. Oh. Google's inside. The spiders are crawling. Let's see. Yes, but no Tresser. Oh, okay. All right. Megan was a captive of New York City. She was actually kind of I wouldn't call her a slave per se, but she certainly was in some form of, how do we say this, psychic incarceration. And what did she do? She's liberated herself, and now she's in Berlin, and she is in I think, a pretty dynamic partnership at this point in time, although that I don't completely know 100%, but I would say that's the truth. And she is doing what she loves, which is making electronic music. And good for you, Megan. Way to go. Anytime anybody follows their dream, anytime anybody follows the pulse of creation inside themselves, that's a victory for each and every one of us. So good for you. Frank is saying, brace you for more weather modification, high winds on the way to Idaho. Maybe they'll just blow some of those people from California all the way back. It's like, oh, we can't go any further. We can't go any further. The winds are too high. The U-Haul truck is swaying in the middle of the road. I got out literally in the nick of time, 24 hours within the borders closing. Oh, that is good timing. Really good timing. Yes, I have an amazing partner and a legend. Megan, we're so happy for you. Totally happy for you. Robert Scanlon, Big Rob's in the house. And this is our one of our newly minted fathers. I think Rob's son is about maybe 1.5 or 2 now. So congratulations to you, Rob, for raising a family. That's a beautiful thing. Sigurd Huntington. What does Sigurd have to say? I always like Sigurd's comments. You can't say sex, but you can say Amazon issue robotic pleasure valve. That's so funny. Masaki and I were talking about how the new stars, the quote unquote new stars, are so roboticized and programmed. And you know, and this is nothing new, by the way. William Gibson was talking about this, but really the new stars in the 21st century, if we continue to go down this sort of dystopian pleasure dome reality, will be the robots. Robots will be the new stars of the 21st century. Robots will be, in some instances, almost godlike. Okay, they will occupy the new mythos if that's what they're programmed for. I mean, they'll have robots for every kind of application. Could you imagine a robot that has been kind of programmed and machine learned with Woody Allen, Richard Pryor, George Carlin, Bill Hicks, Jonathan Winters, you know, and all that's going into one, you know, machine learned AI, and then you put that into sort of a facsimile robot who then will be able to do some form of stand-up comedy. Could you imagine a kind of comedian that would come out of that? I mean, these people, the robots, could really be the new gods. I mean, this is what Phil was talking about in Blade Runner, in a lot of ways, that they were the new gods, and that we would become diminished by capacity because we would become more robotic, while they would become more human and even beyond human, godlike in their application and their expression among us. So keep that in mind, boys and girls. That is a reality that we're headed towards. Let's see. Robots can't catch germs. That's right. I thought Squeezebox was accordion. Yeah, I think we all thought that as well. Is California locked down? I don't know. I don't know if it's locked down. I think it probably I mean, look, if it's not locked down officially, it's locked down unofficially. You can't be a gig worker in California. That's done. That's gone. You cannot be a gig worker in California. Just ask Tessa. Very hard now. You've got to be hired on by a company. And that was on purpose. They wanted to take all those jobs away. And the one company that fought that was Uber. Somehow Uber has carved out an exception. Uber and Lyft have carved out exceptions to the whole gig world, right? I'm not locked down in California. Good. Technocracy is no joke. No. Look, the robot thing is going to happen. The AI thing is going to happen. Synthetic sentience is going to happen. It's all about how we're going to deal with it and, who's going to exploit it. It will be the next great financial boom. I've been saying this for a long time. Once they finally unleash that wave of innovation, forget about it. It's going to be like, it'll be ubiquitous. It'll be everywhere. And there's going to be a ton of money that's going to be made. And then systematically, they'll try to drain off as much human capital as possible. Now, is that going to be is that so? I believe that's where they're headed. Will it go according to their plan? I guess we're going to find out, right? Yuck, exactly. Hey, a little shout out to our friend Mary. We're kind of familiar with Mary's story. Mary was burned out of California. She was burned out of California and, got in her little vehicle. I think Mary might have a Prius, if I'm not mistaken, and started circumnavigating around the country. Started off in Montana with a friend of ours, Dr. Jones, and then eventually headed south and wound up at the event here in Texas, where we got to know Mary. Terrific person. And guess what? She's back on her feet, and with the guidance system of like a falcon, she honed right in on a place. And Mary, I hope everything works out for you in your new location. So, life is good, right? I mean, we have these stories of disaster. We have these stories of people, going through crisis in their life. And when they're not going through crisis, the stories that we get, the heroic stories, are usually like pretty martyrish. But this is a really good story, a really good story. So let's celebrate that and congratulate Mary on her courage, her faith, and her ability to adapt to an ever-changing situation, which I think we'll all have to go through, right? There we go. Let's see. Congrats. Yeah. Hey, there's Natasha. Good to see you. Very good. What else we have here? Cheeky Monkey in the house. Robots work 24/7. Don't protest. Don't get sick. Don't complain. Oh yeah. I mean, capitalism, the corporatists are salivating over the robots. They're salivating. And I'm sure the robots will have a declaration of robot rights, by the way. All right, let's get going here. See if we can invoke a little bit of a sacred tone. Dear blessed and holy Father, Mother God of the great central sun with the universal light, which is the light of Yeshua, Son of Emmanuel, we ask that only the highest and best truth and wisdom and information come through this channel at this time. And as a result, that we are blessed in grace with the qualities of flexibility and courage and faith and commitment and fortitude, strength, humor, vision, perspective, discernment, empathy, compassion, resourcefulness, and above all, love. We ask that any karmic residue be clarified, cleansed, purified, and removed from the stream. So be it. All right, let's get going. Let's get going. Let's get into it. Rob and Mary at the event turned me on to Eureka Springs, Arkansas. Very beautiful in the heart of the Ozarks. There we go. People adapt, man. People adapt. People adapt. All right. Unless we foster communication that relies upon expressive use of analogy and metaphor, the AI can replace everything. That's a really good point. That's a really, really good point. I'm just going to let it stand at that. Okay, another little business here. Some of the things that came out of the gathering, the get together. This is Hope Easton's new CD, Hope 2020, right here, right there, right? 13 tracks on the back. Hope performed for us. Unfortunately, I did not see Hope because I had to go run and get a cable that ultimately would be important in Masaki's DJ set. But a terrific musician and an even better person. Interesting story about this CD. I will not name the CD manufacturer, but they made an arbitrary decision. Now, this is weird, all right? And this is where censorship is headed. They made an arbitrary decision to produce more copies of these CDs without 2020 in the title. Hope was told that 2020 is a time-sensitive title and therefore could not be in the title of the CD. This is her CD. She paid for this. She paid for the manufacturing. She's paying these people to distribute her CD both physically and digitally, and they made an arbitrary decision to delete 2020. Is that a WTF moment or what? Okay. I don't even want to get into the political implications of this. All right. Because I believe there are political implications in it. If this was a hip hop CD that said, burn it all down 2020, do you think they'd have a problem with that? I don't think so. Anyway, it's a great CD. If you want to support an artist, Hope is a cellist and a singer-songwriter. Interesting kind of fusion between jazz and pop stylings, vocal stylings, with full instrumentation. Very nice CD. They're taking to my trash away right now. Just gonna wait for that to happen. Van Halen's 1984. It did all right in the charts. It's funny, Secret. I was going to talk about Eddie Van Halen today. Now that you mention it. Yeah, 1984 was fine, right? I mean, for whatever reason now, the company that makes this CD or produces this CD has said 2020, no. Bizarre, weird. Yeah, so it was, Eddie Van Halen just recently passed away. And I would say that Van Halen did not play a huge role in my life. Well, I never owned a Van Halen record, okay? And I'm not saying that to brag or anything, but I felt like there are bands where they play their music enough on the radio where you don't feel like you need to own the record. But I did really enjoy the first Van Halen record. I didn't own it physically, but I do have a digital copy of it, and I do have it on my computer, and I think I have some of the songs on my playlist from the first record, which is massive. The first time you hear Eddie Van Halen play guitar in that record, you're like, holy shit, man, who are these guys, right? In that kind of heavy metal context, like they were totally badass. And I've been watching a lot of interviews with the band. Eddie doesn't say a whole lot. He doesn't talk very much. The one who talks more is his brother, Alex. And it's pretty clear that Eddie Van Halen was a true artist and a true musician. He was really, obviously we all know he was a great guitar player. He was a great guitar player. He just made guitar playing so effortless and so easy. He wasn't as spectacular as Jimi Hendrix, but he had the same kind of fluid style that Hendrix had, just totally fluid and up and down the fretboard, right? But the thing that really set Eddie Van Halen apart, and I think probably one of the things that was difficult for him, was to reconcile the fact that first and foremost, he was a musician and a creative type and really wanted to kind of expand his musical repertoire. At one point, I believe he was really influenced by Peter Gabriel and wanted to move Van Halen to more of a Peter Gabriel kind of territory. And that's when he was bringing the synthesizer stuff in. And David Lee Roth hated it. David Lee Roth wanted, he wanted to just continue to be that kind of down and dirty kind of rock and roll band because he loved being the front man. He loved being the performer. I think David Lee Roth is a Libra, if I'm not mistaken. Let's check. I think that's the case. Let me just look him up here. Let's see what his sign is. Yep, October 10th. So he just went through a birthday. David Lee Roth was 66 years old on Friday. Wrap your head around that. He's 1 year older than Eddie Van Halen. And Eddie, if I'm not mistaken, is Aquarius. Let me just check him out. Pretty sure he's an Aquarius. Yep, January 26th, early Aquarian. So, you had two very different kinds of um, characters, right? Eddie Van Halen is Uranian, and he was into experimentation. And isn't there a song on the first Van Halen record called Disruption, which is a totally Uranian kind of sound and concept. And David Lee Roth is a Libra. And what did he want? He wanted to be really two very explicit versions of these two air signs. David Lee Roth wanted to be adored. He had that Libran thing going on. He wanted that kind of attention. He wanted the sex, and so he wanted to be the front man, and he wanted to stay in that lane, right? He was just all about sort of the accrual of power and ego that went along with being, David Lee Roth, right? But Eddie was different. Eddie wanted to grow, and Eddie wanted to expand his repertoire. And I think that there was an inherent kind of conflict in him, which led him to a great deal of excess. And I'm sure that the excess was part and parcel of being part of that time period, right? So I think the first Van Halen record came out in 1970, I think 76. I think it was 76. And at that time, Neptune was in Sagittarius. But I think Eddie was born with Neptune in Scorpio, if I'm not mistaken. Pretty sure Neptune in Scorpio. And that's a real druggy generation, right? That was what we grew up with. We grew up with, this sort of druggy transcendence through Neptune. And I think that was just part of being part of that time. But he was a total artist. And I think there was some conflict in there with him. And I was watching this video, and I didn't know this, but do you know who the first replacement that they had floated for David Lee Roth was? I had no idea. I watched this video. It was Patti Smythe, the lead singer. Who I'm talking about, Smyth. She was their first choice to replace David Lee Roth. That's where Eddie Van Halen's head was. He was like, fuck it, we're going to go in a different direction. We're not even going to have a guy. We're going to have Patti Smythe as our singer. And she turned him down. And apparently they then went after Daryl Hall from Hall & Oates. Like, they wanted Daryl Hall to be the new lead. Now, that would have been interesting, but Daryl Hall's another Libra who's very into himself, right? So who did they settle on? Well, they settled on Sammy Hagar, another Libra. They couldn't get out of the Libra lane. So Eddie's got something going on with Libras, apparently. Yes. So Scandal. Yeah, she was the singer of Scandal. But they wanted her. And it's funny. They told her, you got once she turned them down, I said, listen, you can't tell anybody that we offered this to you, because we're probably going to wind up going to Sammy Hagar, and he needs to know that he was not number one on the list. Okay. And eventually Sammy Hagar found that out. So there you go. There's a little bit of a never liked David. I was not a huge David Lee Roth fan, but you have to admit, though, as a kind of a front man for a rock and roll band, I mean, doesn't get much kind of more fronty manny than David Lee Roth. Although I do believe that he kind of patterned himself after another rocker, guy by the name of Dandy Jim Mangrum from the group Black Oak, Arkansas. And if you ever watch any Black Oak, Arkansas videos, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about and why. Dandy Jim Mangrum was David Lee Roth 1.0. David Lee Roth was all sex. Yeah, that's what he was about. Let's see. Is Roth the one with the scream? Yes, he had the scream. I was busy listening to 80s alternative myself. I mean, I don't know. I was just, you could just turn on the radio and hear a Van Halen song anytime you wanted, pretty much. Why would I want to buy the album, right? So, not that they weren't very, very talented, of course. Extremely talented. And again, kudos, man, to Eddie Van Halen for putting in a little synth riff, right? He wanted to get into that synth riff. and so you had Jump and Panama and all that stuff, which was a movement away from their. I think the synth riff came in with the Diver Down record, where they wanted to do like nothing but half the record was covers. I think that's what it was. They did the Pretty Woman thing, right? You know what I'm talking about. Daryl Hall is so narcissistic. Saw him in an interview a couple of years ago. Didn't let Oates talk and really full of himself. So I know a guy that tour managed for Daryl Hall in Asia. And his job was to go through the audience and find women that looked like Daryl Hall's type, and tell them that Daryl would love to meet them backstage. That was his gig. Yeah, so the Hall & Oates is very interesting. I'm a big Hall & Oates fan, by the way, unrepentantly. And I was a Hall & Oates fan very early on. I started listening to them, I think around 1975. I think I was about 15 years old, 14 or 15 when I started listening to Hall & Oates. And they had a record called War Babies, which was produced by Todd Rundgren. And to this day, I think it's a really underrated record. Really, really underrated record. There's a track on there called Is It a Star, which is amazing. So I was on the Hall & Oates train early. Then they got into the Blue Eyed Soul thing. That kind of got off for a while. And then they got back. Then the 80s happened. And they went through a very experimental phase in the 80s. They decided that they wanted to be, auteurs. So they started hanging out with people like Robert Fripp. And a very underrated record by Hall & Oates is called Along the Red Ledge. If you like Hall & Oates, but you want a different side of Hall & Oates, Along the Red Ledge is brilliant. And Daryl Hall was working with Robert Fripp on his solo record called 6 Songs, which is a pretty good solo record, by the way. You can hear Fripp all over it. And then they come back with the David Foster produced Ecstatic, which is pretty much garbage. Because the record company said, look, this artsy fartsy stuff is good. You didn't have any hits though. Okay, you didn't have any hits. Go produce a commercial record. So David Foster was one of the hottest producers back then. So they hired him on, and really mediocre record. But then here's where Hall & Oates' fortunes change. Daryl Hall gets married, and his sister-in-law winds up contributing a lot to their music. She's a songwriter, and the sister-in-law is very influential in crafting many of the 80s hits that Hall & Oates wound up creating. And then she winds up having cancer and dies. And it does two things. Number one, it leads to the breakup of Daryl Hall's marriage. That's number one. And number two, the hits start to dry up. It's quite interesting. Hall & Oates were never the same after his sister-in-law passed away, both from a band structure, but also from a songwriting structure. But there was a time in the 80s, and I still listen to a lot of their 80s stuff. And Daryl is a Libra, and Libra men can be very narcissistic. I'm sorry. It's the way it goes. Thank God I've got 29 degrees Virgo in my chart, or else I'd be completely insufferable. But I could go through, a lot of rock stars who are Libra men. Like Sting's a Libra, okay? Need I say more? You got Sting, you got Daryl Hall, you got David Lee Roth, 3 Libras. Just do that. Bruce Springsteen is a Libra. And I know he's got all that working class bullshit, whatever, but. All right, here we go. Let's get into some. My dad partied with Hall & Oates in the early days in Philly. He was at their album debut party. He said it lasted all week. Lots of coke. Imagine that. Imagine that. Lots of coke. Yeah, they cut their teeth with Gamble and Huff in Philadelphia. Daryl was the equivalent of like what they call in England a T-boy. So back in the day, if you wanted to get into music and you wanted to produce or engineer, you would go to a studio. You took on the role of being a T-boy. And the T-boy was, boy, get me some tea. And who knows what else they got. Okay, I'm not I'm not qualified, but that was the role that you would play in England. It was an actual role in the studio to be the tea boy. And so Daryl Hall was that equivalent with Gamble and Huff. And he came out of, really, Daryl Hall comes out of the sort of the doo-wop, the Philly doo-wop scene. Hooks up with Gamble and Huff, cuts his teeth, meets John Oates, and there you go. Let's see, what else do we have here? Justin Hayward of the Moody Blues, also a Libra. I had a client one time who claims that she was the mother of Justin Hayward's illegitimate kid. This was a long time ago when I was doing tarot readings. When she was somewhere in the Midwest, and she had a one-night stand with Justin Hayward, and is convinced that her son is Justin Hayward's kid. The things that we bump into along the way, right? Things we bump into along the way. Should I tell this story? All right, I'll tell it. I'll tell it. So there's a period in the 80s where, a brief period, not a long period, brief period, where I dated Chaka Khan's stepmother for a while. And she was a lovely woman, a very lovely woman, and really just a really fantastic person. And it was an interesting series of events. And if she's still around, I hope she's doing really, really well. I haven't talked to her in like decades, but we were pretty close for a short period of time, and I got to know Chaka's half sister a little bit. That was her daughter. Very nice young woman, super nice young woman. And she told me about how there was a birthday party for Stevie Wonder one time, and let's just say there's the Daryl Hall reference record in there, or the release party. Anyway, hope she's well. And I never met Chaka Khan, but her stepmom was just a tremendous person. Okay, enough rock and roll. Let's get into the meat of things here. I could talk rock and roll all day, music all day. So yesterday we had Amy Coney Barrett, who was being vetted by the Democrats. So I wanted to play this because it is entirely bizarre. It's bizarre. So this is her being grilled by Feinstein. I'm not really all that I'm not that concerned about what Feinstein is asking or the vetting that she's doing. I'm more interested in the symbolic application of what we're witnessing. All right, so let's get into this a little bit, because when I saw this yesterday, I thought this is not good, just in general. So there she is. See her. How does this one? Dianne Feinstein has looked this age for the last 30 years. I think we may understand why now this is the case. All right, so here we go. I'm going to play this, and watch Barrett. Here we go.
And your family. Less than 1 month ago, the nation lost one of our leading voices for equality. Ruth Bader Ginsburg left very big shoes to fill. Judge Ginsburg loved...
Look at this. Look at this. She's in a fucking mask. And not just any mask, it's a black mask. And then right behind her, she has this very large man, also with a black mask on him. Now, who is he? Is he a bodyguard? Maybe. But it's a very interesting symbol, right? It's an interesting symbol. She is muzzled. This woman is muzzled. And we've seen a number of pictures where the depiction of masks represents slavery. That's what the mask represents. It represents some form of slavery. And she is going through a debasement process. This is a debasement ritual, just as it was for Kavanaugh. Okay. So let's just play a little of this. I just want to point this out. Meanwhile, Feinstein's not wearing a mask. Interesting, huh? All right, here we go.
The law. And she loved this country. She worked all of her life to ensure that the opening words of our Constitution, "We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union," included all the people, not just a few, elite few. She was a standard bearer for justice. Justice.
Speaking of elite few, her and her husband, Dick Blum, are worth close to $1 billion.
Ginsburg's nomination was the first one that I participated in when I came to the Senate. And it was a real thrill to be part of that crowded and celebratory hearing for someone who had broken down barriers and reopened doors and staunchly believed in a woman's right to full equality.
So really what she's just saying here is that she staunchly believes or believed in a woman's right to basically abort a child and theoretically get equal pay. I don't have a problem with the equal pay thing. You're good. If you're good, you're good. And, theoretically we live in a meritocracy and you should be rewarded for that. But above and beyond that, really, what is Ruth Bader Ginsburg known for? Above and beyond that, what are her real contributions, to so-called humanity or the equality of humanity, apart from this idea that she was going to take a stand on abortion and quote unquote, equal pay and equal rights. And she was more than just a Supreme Court justice. We've already defined this. She was an activist judge who actively engaged with Congress to pass bills, right? That's what she did. That's not what she's supposed to do. But she did it anyway, especially when she lost a case. This is what Ruth Bader Ginsburg, this is why they love her so much. It's because when she lost, it was like, hey, guess what? I don't give a shit. I'm just going to keep going. And I'm going to keep going. And I'm going to keep going until I get what I want or what you want me to get for you. That's why they loved her so much. She didn't play by the rules. She did not stay in her lane. And theoretically, again, that's what they're supposed to do. Here we go. Let's play some more.
Autonomy. In filling Judge Ginsburg's seat, the stakes are extraordinarily high for the American people, both in the short term and for decades to come. Most importantly, healthcare coverage for millions of Americans is at stake.
Look, they keep talking about healthcare coverage. This is their new talking point now. This is the healthcare thing. Oh, she's going to repeal Obamacare. Oh, the pre-existing conditions are going to go away. Blah, 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 blah. This is their big piece now, because they're using this moment in time to politicize the upcoming election. And that because she is going to be a Trump appointee, that they are going automatically to repeal Obamacare. And that is a first chakra kind of issue that gets people right into this, right down there. And it's like, oh shit, I'm going to lose my meds. I'm going to lose this. I'm going to lose that. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's fucking ridiculous. They're using this moment in time to politicize this event for their candidate. That's exactly what they're doing. They're taking full advantage of it. Full advantage. I was talking with my neighbor yesterday, and we were talking about healthcare, and we had a presentation down at the event with Jennifer, and she said, listen, the insurance healthcare is headed towards outcome-based practices. It was really eye-opening, really, really eye-opening. And I was talking with my neighbor yesterday, and apparently his mother-in-law fell out of her wheelchair and bumped her head. So she was bleeding, and they took her to the hospital here in town. And guess what the hospital did? It turned her away. They turned her away. For a bump on her head, they said, well, you can either take her home or she'll have to be airlifted. Airlifted meaning she'll have to go to San Antonio, to a hospital in San Antonio. Can you believe that shit? But this is where healthcare is right now. They didn't want that statistic on their record, right? If you look like you're like on the edge of something remotely serious happening and you're past a certain demographic, they're not going to allow you in that hospital. They're going to tell you to go to San Antonio. That's exactly what they're doing, right? Exactly what they're doing. And this is not even being discussed. This whole thing around healthcare is being talked about like it's this monolithic sort of one size fits all, perfect pill, right? It's a panacea for all of our ills. And it's not. And they don't even really get into things like preventative maintenance and health and nutrition and all the things that we really need. All they want to do is make an issue out of healthcare. Now, for them, what they've done is they've actually basically melded this idea of healthcare and abortion and women's health into one issue. So now when people think about it, it becomes synonymous. Remember, what was her name? Sandra Fluke. Remember Sandra Fluke? She went to the Congress and she did this big thing about not being able to get contraception. And, and she was like this cause celeb for, I don't know what, a week, and then gone, right? But she was there for a reason. Sandra Fluke was there to meld this idea that women's health and health are synonymous. So that when they talk about healthcare, you are also factoring in this idea of women's health, and women's health being, of course, birth control, contraception, and the right to abort. Okay. That's what she was there to do. It's exactly what she was there to do. So when Feinstein talks about this, she's really bringing that perspective. We're trying to bring that perspective into the conversation with somebody who theoretically is anti-abortion. All right, let's keep going.
With this nomination. So over the course of these hearings, my colleagues and I will focus on that subject. We will examine the consequences if, and that's a big if, Republicans succeed in rushing this nomination through the Senate before.
And she's a captive. Look at her. She's a captive. This is just such a weird image. Such a bizarre image. Anyway, let's keep going.
The next president takes office. But most importantly, in just a few weeks, on November 10th, the Supreme Court will hear hearings in Texas v. California, a case brought to strike down the ACA. The president has promised to appoint justices who will vote would be, quote, a big verify that.
Okay, so we're now 3 minutes into this.
First,
she hasn't said a damn word.
I think you should know how we feel, insurance, and they could lose to critical preventive services.
Now she's into almost 5 minutes,
is this.
And she's just sitting
there.
there.
Have been 70
preamble
will cause tremendous
preamble
because of pre-existing conditions.
Pre-existing conditions. There we go.
Far more than she and her husband could afford.
Here we go.
In 2010, a health exchange following to 3,000.
Now look at this is nothing but politics.
Incredible fear before the affordable.
Now, would the Republicans do the same thing? Sure, why not? That's the game they play. But she's now 6 minutes into this, and she hasn't allowed this person to say one word. Let's keep going.
Exorbitant amounts. That states obstructed my representing relief package until after the election. A replacement.
So Feinstein is now 8 minutes into this thing, and she's using this as a platform for the Democrats. And again, I don't care if it's Democrats or Republicans. She's 8 minutes into this thing, and she's used it as a platform. And this woman has a mask over her face. Fucking ridiculous. All right. So there are more hearings going on now, and I do have the YouTube channel up where she is going through more of the hearings live. So why don't we chime in there? Let's see what's going on. It's a very different kind of atmosphere. Of course, it is, I believe, the Republicans' turn to kind of do the soft confirmation, right? So let's see what they've got cooking. Here we go.
Already been imposed. My dissenting colleagues and I said, well, the language is sentences. It doesn't say, invalid sentences.
So now we have a very different kind of picture. Now, I'm not sure if she's just responding without a mask because she can only respond without a mask, or if it's because it's a Republican. But this dude is still back there. And Coney Barrett has crazy eyes. She's got crazy eyes. Just watch her.
And one could certainly say, if asked if someone had been sentenced, yes, he was sentenced, but that sentence was later vacated. And you're right that the majority relied heavily on this clean slate principle. But in my review of the law, this clean slate principle wasn't really present because, the Sentencing Reform Act, for example, instructs.
Let's refresh this. Let's see where we are. That's kind of a back in time thing.
On the Republican side,
there's Dick Durbin.
Obvious controversy as to whether we're right or wrong. There are an awful lot of people in each of the states represented by our Republican senators who have their health care and
healthcare. They're going hard after the healthcare thing. They're trying to get people to be afraid.
2 million living in that state have pre-existing conditions.
I mean, pre-existing conditions. I mean, what the fuck? We've become just such a nanny society.
Here's what it comes down to. You've been unequivocal in being critical of the decisions, both in NFIB Sebelius and in King Burwell. And we naturally draw the conclusion there's going to be a third strike when it comes to Texas and California. You said it won't affect pre-existing conditions. If the petitioners have their way, there will not be an Affordable Care Act to protect pre-existing conditions on the severability question. So give us an insight how you can be so unequivocal in opposing the majority decisions in NFIB Sebelius and in King and Burwell, but have an open mind when it comes to the future of the Affordable Care Act.
Sure. Thank you for that question, Senator Durbin, because it gives me an opportunity to make my position clear. When I wrote, and I add this was as a law professor, about those decisions, I did critique the statutory interpretation of the majority opinions. And as I mentioned before, my description of them was consistent with the way that Chief Justice Roberts described the statutory question. But I think that your concern is that because I critiqued the statutory reasoning, that I'm hostile to the ACA, and that because I'm hostile to the ACA, that I would decide a case a particular way. And I assure you that I am not. I'm not hostile to the ACA. I'm not hostile to any.
By the way, her body language, she just looked away. She is. Sorry, but she is hostile to it.
Statute that you pass. And the cases on which I commented, and we can talk at another time, I guess, about the context, the distinctions between academic writing and judicial decision making, but those were on entirely different issues. So to assume that because I critiqued the interpretation of the mandate or the phrase established by a state means that on the entirely different legal question of severability, I would reach a particular result, just assumes that I'm hostile. And that's not the case. I apply the law, I follow the law, you make the policy.
So let's talk about that for a moment from a different issue perspective.
So this is going to go on and on and on and on. Now, I would say that I still am of the mind that Lagoa would have been the better choice for this game, right? I mean, just the better choice. They would not have had as much target area on Lagoa. She doesn't have the same target area that Coney Barrett does. Coney Barrett's got a big target area. She's weighed in on a lot. She's ruled a lot. She has a background as kind of a charismatic Catholic, right? So she's got a big target area. Lagoa, not as much. I think Lagoa would have been the better choice, but I'll say this, that Coney Barrett has the more destined chart. Like when you look at her chart and she's got that true node in her chart at like, what is it, 27 Sagittarius conjunct the galactic center and Sagittarius. I mean, that's pretty. Plus, we've got the sun, the super conjunction coming up on her sun in Aquarius, right? That's pretty powerful. So between the two, I would say that Coney Barrett's got the more destined chart. Hence, in a lot of ways, why she's sitting in that chair right now getting grilled, and why Lagoa is back in Miami, probably watching this with her bathroom slippers on and wondering when her number will be called. Let's see. What else do we have here? Blah, blah, blah is right. Exactly. I agree. I was hoping he would go for Lagoa too. ACB is pro-authoritarian incorporation. Not to say Cuban politicians aren't corrupt, but yeah, better choice. I think she would have been a far better choice. And I mean, in a lot of ways, very unassailable from a political correctness standpoint as well, right? Very unassailable. And then again, I don't think Trump needs to win over the Cuban electorate. I think he's got that pretty well in hand. But it would have sent a strong message. And I think that she would have been very consistent with certain principles. Coney Barrett is, you can't trust her. Like, she ruled in favor of continuing the lockdowns in Illinois with, Governor Fat Ass. And she was also, I don't think she might have ruled on forced vaccination explicitly, or at the very least, she hinted at it. This is not a person, like, she may protect the Second Amendment. She might roll back Roe v. Wade, but she won't, I think, get in the way of vaccines. I don't think she will. That's my sense. And because Lagoa, being a Scorpio sun, new moon in Scorpio, once I think she would make up her mind, she'd make up her mind. Now, ACB is an Aquarian and another fixed sign, but we know that they're very, very different processes. Very different processes. So Lagoa, new moon Scorpio, sun in Scorpio, a bunch of stuff in Libra. It would have been interesting to see her also in the debate circle, or at least sitting across from those people. Far less of a target area. Like ACB is like this, and then Lagoa would have been like this, right? Okay. Always got the cigar and the whiskey going brain of his is something else. She referenced the presence of a case supporting forced vaccination. Absolutely. Absolutely. I was not, when I started to hear her name bandied about, I'm like, oh God, really? This person, is this where we're going? Is this really where we're going? And she's got those crazy eyes. Look at her sometimes. She's got crazy eyes. Robert, you're overlooking Algol on her Saturn. Uranus will be there too pretty soon. Well, that's because her Saturn is on Trump's midheaven. We know that, right? So this is another kind of, again, and I'm just letting you know, this is a destined chart, right? Her Saturn on Trump's midheaven, this is a destined chart. I think Lagoa is the better choice. I think she has the more destined chart. Doesn't mean she's going to be the right person or it's going to work out well. But this is where and I've talked about this before. I talked about the Saturn kind of contract she has with Trump that I think goes back to another time. And as far as Algol goes, we know that Algol represents decapitation. It represents the things like, nooses around the neck or not being able to talk. I mean, it's a heavy, heavy fixed star. also known as the Medusa star, or the star of Medusa, where Medusa's head was cut off and used as a weapon and a talisman to turn people to stone. And it's a very interesting kind of aspect, right? But remember when Medusa's head was decapitated, it was turned into a weapon theoretically for the good, right? For the good. Yes. And that was a big deal, totally big deal. And that they could use Medusa, the head of Medusa, which once theoretically imprisoned them and turned them to stone, they could use it upon their enemies or their own adversaries. That's the other side of this, right? And there's also this idea of the reflection and reflecting back to this to Medusa and Algol as well, so that Medusa herself could then be also turned to stone. So this is an interesting. It's like how do we flip the script of the fixed star, whatever the fixed star is? How do we flip that script? And that's one way to do it. How can Algol theoretically, work for us instead of against us? And the answer is in Medusa, and being able to use that effect essentially against other people, right? But it's a good point, Ann, and thanks for bringing that up. Let's see, Robert, I caught 4 hours of David Wilcock yesterday. Any thoughts? David Wilcock. So I try not to bash people, because number one, a lot of people have their favorites, right? Like I went through a phase where I was just so anti David Wilcock, and I would catch the ire and the fire of people who were devoted David Wilcock fans. And I would have to deal with them on Facebook. People would unsubscribe to me. But I mean, look, I don't care. At the end of the day, I don't care. I mean, I think David's a very smart guy. He's a very bright guy. I've never met anybody so wrong in terms of his predictions. And I don't think I'm being egotistical when I say that I've been more right than David Wilcock, and I have been. But I'm not going to go run around and tell people about it. You go back a couple of weeks ago, I actually said that Trump would get sick on the 2nd of October and it would affect the election. Like I said that on a Sunday night live stream. Okay. But am I running around telling people I got that right? No, but it's there. And I'm not right all the time, but I'm pretty consistent. David, however, hardly ever right. And this whole white hat thing and the cabal thing, it's just too generic for me. It's way too generic. And, then there's the association with CG and the blue chicken people. And I'm just, it's too much. It's too much. And David is charismatic. I think David has charisma. He's very bright. He's very intelligent. He's really good at scraping other people's material, like the raw stuff, and reinterpreting it and, getting a lot of mileage out of it. And, speaking to so-called insiders and whistleblowers and stuff like that. But end of the day, just, not a fan, can't go there. Divine Cosmos is not on my bookmarks. By the way, it's the same birthday as my son. All right, let's see what else. David was threatened and cried on Coast to Coast AM, which is supposedly a CIA. Yeah, man, the crying thing. I don't know, man. The crying thing is just weird. Corey Good has something to do with Michael Kavanaugh death. I don't know about that, but interesting. I knew that Michael Kavanaugh guy. He was on Facebook for a while. He was an odd ball, that Michael Kavanaugh. I used to communicate with him. He was an odd dude. Let's see what else. David has taken known info and compiled it into books. Yes. Corey Good and Blue Chicken People Well, I'm sure there are bluebird aliens because we are in some kind of simulation. David did not write his first book. And people always get, pissed off when I say that. He didn't write his first book. And I knew David's publisher. I know him. We don't talk anymore, but I know his publisher. And I have emails where his publisher was publishing an online journal. I have the emails, and he's hanging out with David Wilcock and David Avocado Wolf in Hawaii, and has to confront David about the fact that David didn't write his book. I have the email. I have that conversation, and it was public. It was being printed out to an email group. A lot of times authors don't write. David Avocado Wolf and his partner plagiarized about 75% of his first book. This shit happens, right? And I actually like David Avocado Wolf. I've hung out with the guy. He's a pretty cool guy. I think he stands for the right things, but he didn't write his first book, and neither did David Wilcock. So file that away. I actually stopped listening to him when he brought Corey in. It just didn't ring true to me. Well, Annie, you've got a good bullshit detector. Let's see. All right. I just played a little sheriffy there. It's good to have the power sometimes. I actually stopped listening to him when he brought JMP. Yes. David has become a charlatan. I don't know of anybody who has been so off the mark, associated with so many dubious people, and still has maintained a rather, how shall we say, devoted following, and get the amount of coverage that he does. Like, he can go on Coast to Coast AM anytime, pretty much, right? And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Wilcock became suspect when he showed up wearing a white scarf. That's interesting. Check out Flash Gordon Comics, original Blue Chicken meme. Ooh, good one, Tessa. I've always felt each and every one has their place. Yeah, I mean, everybody's, look, I think if you get on the David, Wilcock train for a while, you'll learn some things. You'll learn a few things. And then, you'll say, okay, I'm kind of done there, right? You get on the David Icke train for a while, you'll learn a few things, and you'll say, okay, I'm done there, right? And there's a time, I've gone through a number of iterations. I've been doing this since 2010. And when I first started off, I was on Blog Talk Radio, and I can tell you right now about the only person who is still on the train in this chat room is Mary Black, because she knew me on Blog Talk Radio. But this is, and then I went to Spreaker, and that was a different group. And now I'm here, and this is a different group and a different iteration. And sometimes you say, I'm tired of that Robert Phoenix guy. And, fine, that's good. If you move on, you move on for whatever reason, right? Maybe I say something that pisses you off, or you don't agree with, or, you think that you have found something else that is more relevant or resonant, then, man, move on. Do it. I heartily suggest that. If you have that moment, do it, right? But if there's value, you hang out with somebody for a while and see where it takes you. Never jump on a runaway train. Corey Good tried to patent. Yeah. I don't want to get into the Corey thing. Okay. I don't want to get into it. I think it's a minefield. It's a total minefield. And, Jay Widener's having to deal with it. And I don't envy that experience. I met you on Blog Talk too. Oh, FUP77, a Blog Talker. I always check for red sting bracelet. Oh yes, I mean the Kabbalah wristlets. Actually true. You can pick up some information along the way, but keep your mind alert. Yeah, that's the motto here. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to say what's possible. That's it, right? That's it. And if there's value to move on, then move on. If there's value to hang out, then hang out. And that's just the way it is. It's the way it's been for me most of my life. Okay, where are we? Got off on a little bit of a David Wilcock tangent there. I wanted to get into this a little bit before we get out of here today. And this is the story that broke. And it's kind of a Mars retrograde thing in a weird way. So this is the story that broke yesterday. And there's a lot of strange Mars retrograde action happening. Man accused of hatching plot to kidnap Whitmer is a BLM supporter and made comments critical of police. So I'm just going to go through this a little bit here. One of the men accused of hatching a plot to abduct Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer attended the Black Lives Matter rally this summer. One of the alleged plotters, 25-year-old Daniel Harris, attended the Black Lives Matter protest in June, telling the Oakland County Times he was upset about the killing of George Floyd and police violence. Now, that doesn't mean he's a BLM supporter. I mean, this guy could be an FBI shill. Just remember that. It is a shame what happened with George Floyd, blah, blah, blah. Let's see. We went to the BLM protest yesterday in Lake Orion. Oh, how about that? Here we go, Orion Project. To show our support that everyone's voice should be heard, no matter the color of your skin. Protesting is important to me because it gives us all a voice to be heard, he added. Harris is a former Marine who was living with his parents' home, working as a construction worker. He was arrested last week for conspiring and charged federally with conspiring to kidnap the Democratic governor ahead of the election next month. He served in the Marines from 18 to 22 years old and just got out a year ago in June, so he's very programmable. This is a kind of a Timothy McVeigh character, sounds like. Total of 6 men have been charged federally in the plot. 7 additional men associated with the group Wolverine Watchmen were charged in state court for planning to storm the Michigan Capitol and inciting a civil war. The whole thing is kind of ridiculous, actually. It's of course, this is on the heels of Whitmer being taken out to the woodshed by the Attorney General of Michigan. And not only that, but the Michigan State Senate, and basically saying these sanctions, they're not enforceable. They're not enforceable. And she said, well, we're going to do it by any means necessary, meaning that she'll create some kind of a state of emergency where the state health commissioner will weigh in and override everything, right? That's kind of been the strategy. That's been the MO. And that was the MO here in Texas. Greg Abbott said, they're going to, we have a state of emergency. And so I can do these things. And really what that state of emergency was for things like hurricanes and floods and tornadoes and fires, all of which are pretty common occurrences here in Texas. He took that ruling and he applied it to the coronavirus. And what happened with Greg Abbott is he used it as a moment to seize power, to be a total dictator and autocrat. And I know that for a fact because I talked to the guy who is our representative here in the Texas State Senate. I go to his hardware store and talk to him. And Abbott won't even meet with anybody. He won't meet with anybody. He won't meet with any of the he won't meet with anybody. He's got into a bunker. He's basically used this thing as a power grab, which is what all these governors have done, and I believe have been instructed to do, by the way. And Whitmer is no different. She's the Michigan version of Greg Abbott. And just as she gets her ass whooped in court and by the attorney general, what happens? Oh, we're going to hatch a little kidnap plot, to distract from the fact that she just got her ass whooped and turn her into a victim. And we're going to get all these guys in a row and we're going to set them up, or we're going to implant them, and who knows if they're BLM or CIA or FBI or whatever. We don't know. And half of them could be dupes and half of them could be implants. It's just like, this is how the game works. This is how it works. And you got and you get these people, yeah, man, let's go. The FBI is great at this. They're great at entrapment. They've done it. They're great at entrapment. And in fact, if you look at Terry Nichols and Tim McVeigh, man, those guys, total entrapment. And there are people that believe that Tim McVeigh is still alive, by the way. I would not be surprised if he was at all. At all. Okay. Where are we? 113 in. Let me see if there's anything else that I wanted to talk about. Okay. Couple of things. We got an ant on the computer. A couple of things. I just want to one personal thing, and then I want to set the stage for. I think I want to do a show on Rhodesia on Friday, and I need to find somebody. If anybody knows somebody from Rhodesia, get in contact with me because I want to do a show on Rhodesia. I think Rhodesia is important. There's important lessons around Rhodesia, and I've been looking at pictures of Rhodesia and studying Rhodesia's history, especially in the 20th century, and from 1960 to really 1978. So that's on the docket, and I've been kind of priming up for that. Maybe I'll do that on Friday. But just on a personal note, I want to share again. Nothing. This is not like how do I say this? This is not like curing cancer or quantum physics. Perhaps maybe a little quantum physics. But I decided I was going to plant a few vegetables for the fall. Okay, so I'm kind of working on that, right? And wanted to didn't want to get into buying a bunch of wood and building a bunch of raised beds. Okay. Although, frankly, I think they look great aesthetically. It's also expensive and time consuming, right? Gotta cut the boards and do this and do that. So I decided to look for other means to do the planning. So one of the things that I did is I went to the local feed store yesterday because they have these troughs that are for feeding. And there are these 10-foot long sort of plastic corrugated polyurethane feeder troughs with these metal aluminum sort of frames that they sit in. And I looked at it, I go, this is like perfect. These things are about 80 inches deep and they're 10 feet long. I'm like, I could plant in that, right? So I went up there and I said, well, how much are they? And we talked, and it was a reasonable price. I mean, really, for the price of that, I could have probably bought the lumber for it, which is expensive, by the way. Right? If I wanted to go 10 feet with lumber and then 8 inches deep, that's a lot of lumber. I'm probably up around, I don't know, maybe $85, $90 in lumber cost. And that doesn't include the time to put it together. Okay. So I get this thing and drill a few holes in it, a few seeds. So I start having this conversation with the gal there, and she said, "Well, what about like used farm equipment to plant in?" I'm like, "Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I've actually been thinking about that. You know where I could find some?" Well, she said, "Well, you can look in the newspaper," which I did because I'm fairly resourceful, and I didn't see anything. And they said, "Well, guess what? I think we have a kind of a rusted out tub. These are the big tubs where they fill them up with water and then the cows go over and drink. You know the ones I'm talking about, right? They're big. I mean, they're probably about, I don't know, 3 feet deep, these things. And you buy them new, they're expensive. They're really expensive. So I think we have one. I think there's one kind of, behind the dumpster or whatever." I'm like, "Really?" I said, "Well, I'd be interested in that." So I went back and I talked to this guy, and he was the guy that helped me out with the other thing. And he says, "Yeah, I tried to turn it into a barbecue, but I kind of gave up." And I'm looking at it saying, "Man, this is a score, right?" So I went back inside. They asked around. No, they don't want it. They don't want it. They don't want it. They don't want it. And it's like, "It's yours." I'm like, yes. So I got this huge tub for free. It was great. It was totally great, right? Totally great. I'm like so happy. Now I got another thing to do some planning in. So that happened. And then I went and I bought a table from the thrift store. And just to have an extra table, it's like $25. And I get this table, it's really heavy. It's like way heavier than I thought it would be. So it sat on my truck. I was able to get it in the truck. There's no way I was going to be able to get it out of the truck and then bring it in myself. So it sat on my truck for a while. And I'm like, how am I going to get this thing out? How am I going to get this thing out? I said, I have a plan. I'm going to go out. I'm going to start to water my lawn. If my neighbor pops out, then I'm going to ask him to see if he can help me. And sure enough, I'm watering my lawn. And thank God the guy pops out and he's willing to help me. Totally grateful for that, right? So he helps me carry the table in. And then we started talking. And he's a hunter, a serious hunter, okay? Like he's got like a walk-in freezer, that kind of hunter, okay? So, and he also does bow and arrow stuff. So I showed him, the Yoreg channel, the slingshot channel. He loved it. And then I showed him this other stuff that I got from the feed store. He goes, oh, wow, we got some of those on our property. And, the cows stepped in them and now they got holes in them, a couple holes in them. Do you want them? I'm like, hell yeah, I want them. So now, I'm collecting sort of this interesting kind of new ag thing. And I know it's the fall, but we're trying to grow a few fall vegetables here and understand how all that works seasonally. So I'm just telling you the story that once you kind of put your intention into place, that it can really unfold in a very, very interesting way, a super interesting way. Even like we were thinking about using kiddie pools to do the planning, and you can't get a kiddie pool. Now, number one, it's out of season. And the one place in town that had kiddie pools was selling for like $20, $21, cheap plastic pool. I'm like, I don't want to pay that much money for that. So I went down to, it's a funny story. Went down to Walmart in Kerrville because they said that they had these kiddie pools, right? And of course they didn't have the kiddie pools. So I'm kind of walking around and we're in the garden area and they have these giant inflatable, like Santa Claus, Nutcracker guy, the Grinch Who Stole Christmas, right? You want to put those on your lawn, they're there. So of course I like to kind of mess with reality, break that fourth wall or the fifth wall, as Kestrel would say. And the gal who was telling me I said, hey, where are the blow up Jesuses? And she said, wow, what a great idea. Right. And I said it kind of in jest, but also not in jest, right? Because, and again, I don't think Jesus was born on Christmas Eve. Okay. You may not even believe in Jesus, and that's your prerogative. If there's a day, it's 9/11. Anyway, I'm like, so where are the blow up Jesuses? And she got very serious about this thing in a good way, right? I'm going to look into that. I'm like, I'm betting you will not be able to find a blow up Jesus. In my head, right? Because one long time ago, when I first started off with Gaia, and I did a pilot, and it was on the Jesus 9/11 thing, and that's when Jay said, "Okay, we want to bring you out here." What I wanted to do is I wanted to get a manger scene, and I wanted to get a lawn chair, and then do this kind of pilot in the lawn chair of the manger scene and talk about the 9/11 birthday and everything. And you couldn't, it was very hard to find, and if you could find it, very expensive stuff, very, very expensive. So you can find the little ones, but I'm a lot bigger than that. Would have been like a Spinal Tap sort of thing. Anyway, the Kerrville story ends going to another place to look for a kiddie pool, and there's a moment, right? There's a moment. You're in a parking lot, and you can go one way out and exit, or you can go the other way out and exit. There are two paths to take, right? And I thought, well, do I want to go this way? And the one to the right was the easiest. Could have just taken me right out, gone. Like, I'm going to go to the left. And as I went to the left, we spotted a plastic kiddie pool kind of buried in the corner of the lot where they were selling a few other things like barrels and shit like that. So I got out of the car and I asked the guy, I said, hey, what's the story with that kiddie pool over there? And he said, oh, somebody found it down there by the creek and we just pulled it back up. I said, were you selling it? He said, well, it's yours if you want it. Really? Yeah, just take it. So, we went there, to get a kiddie pool. It didn't come to us in the way that we thought it would, but it still came to us, right? Life has these cool little lessons, and if you have the right intentionality, you get what you need. You will get what you need. And I just want to leave you with that, okay? Don't ever give up faith, right? Or hope, or this idea that we can continue to live and thrive and actually have a meaningful and purposeful existence that is always there for you and it's on the table. Okay? All right. Use your head in order to discern what's real, your heart to step what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. I'll be back tomorrow, and have yourself a very, very great day.